Good afternoon and welcome to Women Speaking, the platform where women's voices shape conversation in governance, justice and accountability in our region. My name is Nancy Caroline Ayot. I am your host. Today we turn our attention to a deeply troubling trend, the abductions and forced disappearances in the East African community. We ask ourselves a difficult but necessary question. Has the EAC, in its pursuit of integration beyond its founding promises, betrayed its founding promises of democracy, rule of law, and respect for human rights? The East African Community under Article 7, the East African Community Treaty under Article 6 and 7 sets out clear commitments to good governance and adherence to the rule of law. Yet, across member states, we continue to witness cases of opposition figures, activists, journalists, and ordinary citizens being abducted or unlawfully detained, often across borders in ways that erode public trust and silence dissent. As we unpack this issue, we will explore what the law actually provides for, from extradition to mutual legal assistance frameworks to regional obligations under the UN and EAC treaties. We'll ask why these law pathways are increasingly being replaced by security-led abductions and political intimidation. But beyond the legal and political dimensions, we'll bring forward the gendered impact of fear, how these disappearances affect women not only as victims, but as mothers, sisters, and partners left in uncertainty, carrying the emotional and social burden of loss and silence. And finally, we'll ask ourselves, what does a people-centered, rights-based integration look like? Can citizens, civil society, and women's movements reclaim the EAC vision and make human rights dignity its true cornerstone? I have with me in the house a panel of distinguished guests, and I'll start introducing them from my extreme left coming in. I would like to introduce Ms. Esther Nakitende. She's a legal officer at the Women Pro Bono Initiative. Esther, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nancy.
We have our regular panelist, the usual suspect. We have Gloria Kamayangi. Gloria is the head of the Kamayangi Gloria Foundation. Welcome to the Women's Show.
Thank you, Nancy, and good afternoon, viewers.
At this rate, we should be welcoming other guests together, right? Yes. So, to dive straight into the conversation, Esther, I need you to tell us what the spirit of the EAC integration was. What does the EAC treaty promise the people of East Africa?
Thank you very much, Nancy. And our viewers, you're very welcome for yet a very educative and informative episode of Women Speaking. To start right away, I would just love to give a little bit of a background of what the East African community is, how do we get to the spirit and stuff. So in 1967, the East African countries, the three core partners, that is Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, chose to form the East African Community. It later failed in 1977, that is during Idi Amin's time, and it was revived in 1999. So we came in with the treaty establishing the East African Community. Under that treaty, when we look at Article 6 and 7, it is where we find the spirit of why this particular community was established and what is the motive behind having the treaty or the East African Community. And when you look at the treaty itself under Article 6 and 7, they categorize the spirit or the principles or the basement of the community in two fundamental categories. That the fundamental principles for the formation, then the operational principles for the formation. And one of them being the core is human right, the need to protect the human rights of the people or of the citizen within the East African community. Another being democracy, rule of law, a people-centered community, a market that is open to all East African communities. But ideally at the top of all those principles or spirit behind the formation of the East African community is one of democracy that is really towards protecting, recognizing, and promoting the human rights of all citizens in East Africa.
Thank you very much. I would also, there is a pertinent question that I would like to ask, especially around the EAC treaty. What does it promise on democracy, especially? and rule of law for the people of East Africa. But also, what does the legal framework reflect on mutual extradition, but also mutual legal assistance and the lawful path of arresting persons, especially, say, from a Ugandan perspective?
From a Ugandan perspective, the East African community does not have yet a very clear protocol or policy on extraditing fugitives from the particular or the partner states. But from a Ugandan perspective, we have the Extradition Act that we are supposed to follow as Ugandans. But also to mention, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Ethiopia, and Eritrea are also party to a protocol known as the International Intergovernment Development Protocol on Extradition of Fugitives. And under that, it provides a very clear way of how extraditions in East Africa should be handled. So the legal framework in there is very clear on how that should be done.
Do you believe they have been followed thus far?
No. To also mention, Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania have repeatedly refused to rectify that protocol.
Okay.
So they were part of the partners that formed the protocol, but they have not rectified. So we cannot hold them accountable under that particular protocol. So to that far, it has not been followed.
Thank you so much. And I'm breathing a sigh because now, as countries that have not ratified to a law that could actually potentially hold them accountable, do we have nothing to do? Would you say there's nothing we can do? We cannot say we'll hold you accountable because this is against basic human rights, or this is against the Chapter 4 of the Constitution. Anyway, that's another question for another time. Gloria, let's invite you to the conversation. So, it's like the law turns out, it's like a lot of conversations these days decenter the law, and political abductions across East Africa has been almost the same. In Uganda, cases of opposition, politicians and activists have been abducted by security agencies. They call them drones. They're put in drones and then they disappear. And then later on, maybe you hear they're being kept at this point, and some people you don't hear at all. For example, right now, Sam Muganya, is that his name? Yes, the writer. The writer. He disappeared in Mbarara, and right now, like the headlines over the weekend was like, "Where is Sam?" And still to this point, we do not know. In Kenya, enforced disappearances of human rights defenders and activists, especially under anti-terrorism operations, have occurred. In Tanzania, incidents of cross-border arrests and intimidation of oppositional figures and members, but also journalists, have occurred. So are these isolated incidents, Gloria, or do you identify a pattern, for example?
No, thank you so much, Nancy. My colleagues and the viewers, these are incidences that have occurred, especially when countries are running towards their political season. We have seen abductions of different categories of people, the journalists, the political activists, and other citizens who seem not to agree with the sitting governments. Not necessarily disagreeing as in there is a war, but someone has dissenting views. The East African community, as you have clearly stated, started very well with the values of rule of law, democracy, human rights. But as we have all seen, they have not lived to the expectations of the treaty. The treaty clearly talks about protection of human rights. But we don't see the human rights being protected as it should have been done. If I'm to mention the East African community, which started far back in 1967 and later collapsed in 1977, was because of some issues. There was a political mistrust, then differences in the political and economic development. While Kenya is a capital economy, was and is, Tanzania was a socialist economy, and Uganda at that time, under the rule of Idi Amin, was a dictatorial kind of government. So the three could not match, because the other one wanted it to protect its economies, and all the industries and institutions belonged to Kenya, and Kenya didn't want to share with other partners. And now the East African community has expanded from the major three that started it, Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and now to others. We have Rwanda, we have South Sudan, we have Ethiopia, among others. And all these may actually thought the wider the integration becomes, the more appealing it should be to the citizens of these countries. However, this has not been done. You are talking of abductions and extradition. There are procedures set internationally on how a person can be extradited. The countries, Uganda and Tanzania and the other East African countries, do not have extradition procedures, but all of them, all the East African countries, they are all a party to the UN Convention on Civil and Political Rights, which we ought to guard against. But there's nothing that's being done. East Africa, the community has the East African Court of Justice, and this is the court that should actually come out and protect the citizens' rights, and should come out and look at the law that establishes the East African community, and try to look at the gray areas and bring out these issues so that they can be addressed through the law. And maybe in the discussion of the summit of the presidents, there's always this summit where the presidents sit and discuss. These are the issues that they should be discussing. However, most of these presidents, they are the orchestrators of these human rights violations. And you cannot eat a cake and you want to have it. So we find it challenging to actually caution the perpetrators of these human rights violations. And so, as citizens of the member states, they should come out either as a think tank of the EAC to try to bring out these issues clearly such that they can be addressed. Short of that, we shall not have a free movement of people, free movement of goods, because each country seems, much as we are expanding, each country wants to protect its own territory. We are now looking at a bigger picture. You are looking at the bigger picture of political federation, but you cannot achieve political federation when you are having all these arrests and abductions happening in each and every country.
Go ahead.
You have now asked something else.
So, you said territorial integrity. And, when the activists from Kenya and Uganda were arrested, the president of Tanzania came out and said that she was protecting the democracy of her country. From what I know, these people were neither armed, they were neither terrorist groups, they did not pose a direct threat to the government of the people of Tanzania. So how would you respond to that? These are not paramilitary groups or rebels to say. Yes, they are people who belong to different categories that hold governments accountable, like activists, like journalists, ideally in a free and in a free and democratic society, they are supposed to be allowed to do their work without any type of interference. So would you still say that they were posing a threat, really?
Of course, when someone commits an offense in a foreign country or in that very country, that person is supposed to be brought to the courts of law, tried, and maybe remanded. But we have not seen this happening. Someone is abducted from, let's say, a Ugandan is abducted in Tanzania, disappears, is neither produced in court nor killed, but in some instances someone dies mysteriously. And this is something that really doesn't bring out the value of the East African community. The member states, the presidents of these member states should really up their game. And if they want to have an example in our region, then we should practice it. If we don't, then there is nothing that is bringing other countries to join us. Of course, other countries will not say anything. Much as we have expanded, other countries have joined, but the three big fish in the integration still dominate. I'm happy the chairperson of the summit rotates. Currently, it was Uganda, and now they have given it to another country. So the chairperson at a certain particular time should actually advance the promotion of these human rights. Tanzania, we never used to hear this in Tanzania, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But why is this happening under the leadership of a woman? It just brings a lot of questions. We thought the women were mothering, the women would protect their children, but it's unfortunate the person whom we were all looking up to, she has done well, she has done what? She's the same person, people are disappearing under her watch. The opposition politicians cannot speak. They were actually suspended, and I think they are not the biggest opposition political party is not participating in the coming elections in Kenya. So it's not only for Uganda, it's beyond Uganda. In Rwanda, it happens, but no one can speak about it. You speak about it at your own peril. We are lucky in Uganda, people speak. At least we have freedom of speech. But what has this freedom of speech helped? We are all crying. This one should be brought to court. This one should be tried. If he's found guilty, then that's the case. But we are all one and the same. I don't see where this East African community is going in the coming years, because the reasons as to why the other one collapsed is the same reason why this one will collapse. People sit in their boardrooms, discuss, and it ends there. We want to see what they discuss is put into consideration. Then we have the East African Legislative Assembly. I don't know what it legislates. Each law, each bill that is passed in the East African Legislative Assembly is sent back to the member state, and the member state gives a heads up on that bill or rejects. But how many bills have now come out together, especially in the protection of human rights? That's what we want. That I'm here, I go to Tanzania, I practice, as long as I'm not a criminal, either here or there. Once I'm found a criminal, there the law is different. If I'm not a criminal, then I'm supposed to exercise my full rights as a citizen of the East African community.
So, I still want to drink from your cup of wisdom. So, in the DRC, there is a full-blown war in certain parts. The The government does not have control of the entire nation. In South Sudan, it's similar. The forces in Uganda had to go to contain the situation. Somalia a few years back was similar. Now, in my view, a lot of these countries are a little unstable, and yet the ones who are stable are firm to curtail dissent very fast. I don't know, what does that say about us as a community? Where are we going? What is this? Where are we going with the trend?
Like I've said, the countries that are supposed to live as examples, especially the three big lions in the EAC, they're supposed to serve as examples of the other countries that are actually in political turmoil. When you look at DRC, the whole of Eastern DRC is not governed.
Yes.
You look at South Sudan, the same. Uganda is a bit politically stable. That's why it has managed to send troops to these countries to go and restore peace. But the peace that we are restoring in the other country should actually be the peace and freedom that Ugandans should actually exercise within their countries. I don't know.
Go on, please. I'm not interrupting you. I'm following.
While these countries are going through a lot, they should find at least comfort in the three countries that started the EAC. I was saying, the East African Legislative Assembly, where each member state sends 9 representatives in that parliament of the EAC, should actually sit and discuss issues beyond their nationalities. Because we are looking at a bigger picture. But anyway, how are we going to discuss issues at a bigger perspective when we are seeing each district is trying to say, I'm a district so-and-so, I'm a district so-and-so, I'm a sub-county so-and-so. We are trying to look at a bigger thing, a bigger EAC, for a bigger market of our goods and services. People must move freely. The goods must live freely, though within the law. I have seen people go out of the country within the EAC or out abroad or other countries, and they commit crimes. Those crimes that are not politically engineered, they have been tried through a normal procedure, and the criminals have been extradited and brought back to their countries for trial. But these ones that are politically engineered, we still have some challenge. And as you all know, Africa, much as we say we want to be big, want to be a bloc, but you cannot be a bloc when someone is just controlling you from somewhere. But even in the East African community, there is also a challenge. Financially, they are not well. I've seen the members of parliament from EAC. They are all running back to contesting the constituencies back home. When actually we should be looking at them as they have gone for bigger things. But they are also coming back to contesting the small constituencies in this country. So what does this show? It shows that the other side, they are not doing well. Financially, maybe they don't exercise, their voices are not heard. And we have really narrowed our politics to Uganda or Kenya or what. Even when these people get jobs, you see, they have been crying. This one says, no, these jobs have been taken by Uganda, these jobs have been taken by Kenyans. Kenya and Uganda have dominated the EAC, when actually the jobs in the EAC should be given on merit. They should be given on merit with experience, the technical know-how, such that at that level, they reason as East Africans, not Ugandans, not Tanzanians. We have seen the Secretary Generals. They are also rotational. It was Uganda, then it was Tanzania, now it is the other side. Now, the biggest challenge with this, now these ones, the big three, they start bullying the other small ones. And you know, the mistrust which led to this East African collapse in 1977 is actually beginning to manifest. And trust me, this EAC has been held strongly by President Museveni. Without President Museveni, maybe this East African will not survive. We want to see these other countries that have joined. We want to hear their voice. We want to hear them talk against these abductions, talk against the human rights abuses. We want to hear them advancing bills. We want to hear them come and sit in this country. At that level, we want to have them, to feel them. When you go back to your district where you come from, someone knows East African community but doesn't know what follows. Maybe we shall see this is just a club of elites, and the common person in the member states, they are actually not feeling the weight of the East African community. We want to see them biting. We want to see an East African community growing big. We want to see it now start giving money. We have a bank where we have a certain country wants to borrow, instead of going to borrow from IMF or World Bank, we want to see them come and borrow from the East African Development Bank. Unfortunately, either I'm ignorant of what happens there, you can tell me, but it's actually a discussion for another day.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Esther, I'll bring you back to the conversation. We're going to talk about the victims and the courts. And I would like to take you back to a conversation that we've been having since the beginning of this year, but mostly because it's been high profile. Dr. Kizza Besigye was taken from Kenya, to put it lightly, taken from Nairobi and brought to Uganda.
In a drone.
Yes, yes, in a drone. But before him, activists of his party were also taken in a similar fashion from Kisumu and brought back to Uganda. Up to now, more than 300 days in custody. He has never been released. He has never been given bail, as you know, and no evidence, no real trial has been started in his case. But also, we know that activists from Uganda and Kenya went to Tanzania, and the way they came back was not through the immigration offices. They were found lying down and battered at the borders. At this point, what is the East African Court of Justice saying about this? But also, how do these victims seek for justice under the EACJ, East African Court of Justice? What recourse, what channels of accountability do they have, if any at all?
Thank you very much, Nancy. To begin with, I would love to emphasize that the way all those persons were captured from those different countries were very improper. Because just to understand a little bit, I guess the process was supposed to be extraditing them. And when you look at even the international laws, you cannot be extradited for any political reason or for your political opinion. But when we look at the reasons why Besigye was taken from Kenya to Uganda, it was political. Much they claim that it is terrorism, what.
Should be brought to court.
But that is entirely a political reason. Then when we look at the East African Court of Justice, an arm of the East African community, one that we would trust has the mandate to protect the rights of the East African citizen. What has it done in all this? I have been looking at a number of precedents set by the East African Court of Justice in regards to protecting human rights. I should first say that one, the East African Court of Justice has laid back when it comes to protecting human rights. A key example is the case of Katabazi versus Uganda, versus AG and others, when they petitioned the East African Court of Justice. It did not give them a proper decision. Much as we would think as citizens, when we fail in Uganda, when the Constitution of Uganda says that after Besigye has been detained for over 180 days, he has mandatory bail, and he has not gotten that bail yet. His next remedy should be the East African Court of Justice. But clearly, we have seen Ugandans, like, because also Katabazi was more of a political related case. When he tried to seek justice from the East African community, he did not get a remedy. More to it, the East African community does not have an enforcement mechanism. Because even when you go to the East African community and they give you a judgment, then what next?
Who will enforce it?
Who will enforce it? So the channel could be stated that under maybe Article 14 of the treaty, they say you have a remedy under the East African Court of Justice, but then no enforcement. Then what's the purpose of going to the court? If at the end of the day, Dr. Kizza Besigye will petition the same court, he will get maybe a judgment in his favor, but no mechanism of enforcement. He cannot present it before Ugandan courts. So that could be one of the mechanisms through which they would seek redress, but it's also very insufficient in that manner as far as enforcement of their judgment or verdict that they give is concerned. The other could be, I can't even tell how best I can say it, but I feel like all has been done. People have gone to the streets demanding that the man be released.
Gone on social media.
People have gone on X demanding the man should be released. Should we now petition the African Court of Justice or the African Commission? But then the law we study will tell us you cannot go to the African Court of Justice without going through the East African Court. So that is a little bit of a challenge.
Thank you very much. And, you know, just to bring it home, you know, this is the women's show, and we cannot miss talking about women. We know that the UN declared rape as an act of genocide. And we know that some of these political prisoners have been raped, and they're not just female political prisoners who have been raped and subject to those things, but also male political prisoners. As a society that is conservative and all this, so they are affecting us differently. So what role can women's rights organizations or civic groups, we you know, you've said that we've gone to the streets, but what can we do better to make sure that we actually try to hold these people accountable? Which direction should we take advocacy? Because if other channels are blocked, then advocacy is the remaining channel.
First, I would love to really recommend the UN for that. For so long, rape and violence against women was being used as a political weapon. And that was very evident in Rwanda and Kenya. And for the Kayesu case that really came to that conclusion that rape is indeed a political weapon is a win for very many women who are in conflicted areas in Sudan, Rwanda, DRC, and all those other places. And for the question that you have asked, what can we do as women movement?
In demanding for transparency.
I guess the first thing that should be ideal, as they usually say, dialogue. You know, I believe we can start with what may seemingly be not meaningful but can be impactful. Let's seek the audience of the people that are in charge. Let's seek the audience of the East African community. At Women's Pro Bono Initiative, we have a petition in the East African Court of Justice fighting for women's rights. We have sought the audience. What will come out of there, we still do not know, but we have sought the the audience of the East African Court of Justice. The other thing could be engage in research showing how such really does affect the women in the different East African states. Because I remember very vividly one of the persons that was taken while in Tanzania saying she was sexually harassed in the hands of the the police officers that side. Then what do we do as women organization in Kenya, in Tanzania? The deal is to put up the fight anywhere that we can. If it is on social media, let's do that. We should not sit just back and relax. Let's make that voice very loud that these things are happening, and perhaps at the end of the day, we can maybe get a remedy.
You know, some people say that the talking and the advocacy does not work. What is your opinion? Do you believe that dialogue is the best way of resolving differences in a very combative environment such as this? And this is not me playing devil's advocate. I genuinely want to know.
I know it could not be the best way, but we cannot also negate the fact that it makes a change. I hear some politicians, one politician was saying, make noise, you know.
You make some noise, they're hearing you.
Make noise. So if we can also make the noise and get to have a discussion with the people in charge, it may not be the best, but ideally it will show something and it will get us somewhere.
Okay. I want to know about the position of young people. You are a young person, you are a young leader. How better can young people tailor their advocacy? What are the loopholes that you see in young people's advocacy to promote democracy, and what can we do better, or what can we continue with?
And one of the challenges I see in young people trying to promote the advocacy is the lack of the knowledge.
The knowledge gap.
Yes. Many young people are not very informed. You find someone who barely does not even know what is the Constitution is much about. They are telling you, I have a right. You ask them where is the right, they cannot point to an article of the Constitution.
There is no rebuttal. The advocacy ends at what is your right.
But they are quick to say, my right. But when you ask them, so where is your right? You're claiming. They barely know where that right is. So the first thing as the young people, we need to equip ourselves with the knowledge. I guess this is the essence of this conversation, to deliver the knowledge to the people. Then if we have the knowledge, we can argue from a very informed side or point of view. Then the other thing is the language that the people use, the young people choose to use. You find most of them use words I cannot even say. But we cannot negate the fact that we live in, if we are to have conversation, then we need some bit of diplomacy. If we are to engage in a conversation with people that are diplomatic, then we also need to behave in a certain way. But when you go on X and abuse everyone, call the president all sorts of things, because you are Gen Z and this is your language in the era, you know, it's the vocabulary that you have at the time. So I think we also need, as young people, to understand, if we're to have advocacy, then how best can we package what we are presenting to the people that must listen to us. So for me, those two are really very important. Being informed of what are you saying? Do you know about it? Are you reading about it? The other is, how are you presenting your idea? To me, those two are
Thank
key.
you very much. I hear cross-generation conversations coming up somewhere there. And ideally, I approve of that idea that, you know, we should have the older people and the younger people have conversations on, you know, what's right and what's not and what we can do. Gloria, I also want to get your idea. How can we get back and prioritize the original ideals of the East African community, and what would a rights-based approach to, you know, to democracy and but also to use of force by government look like to you?
First of all, I want to say that the citizens of member states can demand accountability from the East African Court of Justice, from IALA, East African Legislative Assembly, and from their member state parliaments and leadership. That way, we shall see something that will come out. We want to see the women leaders. Here in Uganda, they have WOPA. I think in Tanzania, they have a women's movement in their parliament. Kenya, the same. I want to see this women's movement begin to bite and speak out issues beyond their localized village settings, such that the voice of theirs is at a higher level that will demand this accountability from the powers that are. We want to see the youth also demand accountability from the East African community, from the parliament, and from their national parliaments. We have a council, the East African Council. This council is the technical wing of the EAC. This one will be very, very helpful in drafting the laws, in guiding our people on how we can move. The good thing is that we have women leaders at the top level, where we have the speakers. Most of the member countries have women as speakers. And we have the ministers for EAC. We have here in Uganda, the minister in charge of East African Community, or who is a seasonal politician, an experienced person, an elder, Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga. She's at a level of the East Africa, and she is having East Africa at her fingertips. I think with her assertiveness, if she can take a lead, and others will follow in demanding accountability for what we are advocating for in East Africa. Last week there was a conference of the youth. It was Afro-Arab Youth Conference. It was here in Kampala. I found them here at, in a hotel here in Kampala at Africana. I don't know what they were discussing. They had come for dinner, but these are the issues they should be discussing. What is interesting about our Gen Zs is that they get excited very fast, and they don't question some critical things. Mm-hmm. Once they are taken into a hotel, they are told A, B, C, D. They don't ask questions, either for lack of knowledge or for fear for their lives. They don't want to question some issues that will guide us as East Africa. I can't say the East Africa is lacking expertise. We have the best brains as East Africa. We have what it takes to carry out East Africa where we want to see it. We don't want now to start regretting why we would have done this, we have done that, if we did A, B, C, D. Mm-hmm. I want to see my East Africa, where I have participated fully. Mm. We have been having regional East African Interparliamentary Games. These are games that bring all East African member states together for sports and games, every year. Actually, they're about to go. They usually happen. And these are, of course, much as it's for games and sports where people play, they be happy, but they can use the same platform to discuss issues that affect East Africa.
Thank you very much, Gloria. Now we have come to the end of our conversation, and I would like each of my panelists to give their parting shots before we can close the conversation. I'll start with you, Esther.
Thank you very much, Nancy and Gloria, and also the viewers. Thank you for being part of yet this learning experience. My parting shots in line with the topic that we have been talking about today is that mine is a call to the East African community for the people that are in charge, the Secretariat, the Summit, the East African Court of Justice, then the citizenry, us, the people, to remember what was the core or the spirit behind the establishment of the same. One being that we desire to protect human rights. Then I pray and seek that we stand for the same. It is not a burden that we should leave entirely to the East African Court of Justice, to the Secretariat, but it's a responsibility of all of us as citizens of East Africa. Each one of us should do what they can in their capacity. And for the women-led organizations that are fighting for human rights, my also prayer to them is that they should continue doing the same. Let them step into the deep waters of petitioning the East African Court of Justice to find a remedy for the violations against human rights.
I'm happy that you were able to join us on the show. Gloria, please give us your parting shots.
My last point on this discussion, I want to implore all national parliaments to stand up against all sorts of human rights violation. I want to see the East African community, the East African Legislative Assembly, sit in a special session, discuss these matters exhaustively, such that we can have a remedy for whatever that is happening. We don't want to trade a bad name. If you go to the EU, they start demeaning you as East Africa. You go to PAP, then PAP demeans this one. Of course, when you are not doing well in your family, you don't expect the other party to respect you when you are speaking something. We want to see all the citizens in all member states demand accountability, especially from the East African community. They have different departments, the Secretariat, the Commission, the Legislative Assembly. All those departments should come out and speak one voice and promote East African community. We want to see East African community grow bigger and bigger, well aware that the champion and the one that is holding this East African community is reaching his advanced age. We want to see someone now coming up to support this. I'm happy we have an East African standby force. I wish if we could have an East African human rights activists. We have an East African think tank. All these issues can be discussed exhaustively, and we get the solutions to these problems that we are having currently.
Thank you so much. I want to thank my panelists for coming and sharing exhaustively, but we also want to thank our behind-the-scenes camera crew and the team at Civic Space TV. This is the Women's Show, and from us to you, we would like to ask, what does the ideal East African community look like? Share with us on our social media platforms. Follow, subscribe, like. My name is Caroline Ayot. I am your host.